Now, to talk about some of the insights from the Retirement Income Review, we're joined by Andrew Boal, CEO of Rice Warner. Andrew, what does the review tell us about the future of the legislated increase of the superannuation guarantee?
Straight to the superannuation guarantee. I think we've talked about it for a long time. And one of the things, this is a great report to bring out some facts to educate everybody about what we're talking about. One of the key things that came through that was highlighted by the review was the relevance of CPI versus wages indexation on future increases in payments to retirees. And that's a critical assumption that most of the industry has assumed that people would want to maintain their standard of living through retirement at community standards of living, which means that you would increase their payments each year with wages. But Grattan and others, including this review, has been concentrating more on CPI adjustments. And so that's a really critical assumption. If you're looking at CPI adjustments, then Grattan and others would argue that 9.5% or 10% is enough. If you're looking at wages, then you're more likely that 12% will be required. And so that's a critical assumption where I think we've got to do some more research to show what do people in retirement actually spend in retirement, and how much do their payments, or how much they spend each year, how does that change from year to year?
That's interesting. The review also seems to indicate that a more efficient use of savings perhaps would be better than a rise in the super guarantee. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's well known for some time that people are dying, leaving large bequests, and that's an inefficient use of retirement money. The best way to improve the efficiency of people spending in retirement is to have an annuity or some form of guaranteed income at the back end of life. And that way they can have more confidence about spending their money in the early part of retirement, especially in the early years when they're healthier. At the moment, when somebody retires at, say, 67, they don't know how long they're going to live for. And so they spend conservatively to ensure they have something to last to the very end. Whereas if we can secure that last piece with some form of insurance, called an annuity, then they'll give them the confidence to spend, okay, I've now got 15 years between now and then, I can spend the rest between now and then, and that gives them much more confidence.
And what about mechanisms like reverse mortgages?
Home equity is the other area that we haven't tapped. There's, apart from reverse mortgages, there's also the government's pension loan scheme, and that was boosted last year from 1 July 2019, so that a retiree can actually access up to 150% of the age pension. Using the extra amount goes off as a deficit against their home equity. The same thing, very similar to a reverse mortgage. And in that situation, if a couple was entitled to the full age pension, they'd be entitled to about $37,000 a year of income. And from 1 July last year, if they were wanted and owned their own home, they could actually take that up to $55,000 a year, with the excess being used as a credit or debit against their home loan, so their home equity.
This was quite a weighty review, some 600 pages. How will that create change when there were actually no recommendations contained within it?
Well, it's a great education document and a great place to go to for ideas about what to do. So I think you've already hit on a few of them. Home equity was one that they did focus a lot of attention on, this level of the superannuation guarantee. Another one was around tax concessions, and an area that they might focus on there. And they showed that the tax concessions did go quite weightily towards the top 20% of income earners. And that one way to get around that might be to introduce a tax on investment earnings, particularly in the post-retirement period. That would have a mutual effect, that if we've got a 15% tax on investment income pre-retirement, if we also introduced a 15% tax on investment earnings post-retirement, it simplifies the system to a large extent. It gets rid of a lot of the capital gains tax issues that goes through the pre and post-retirement period. And so there are a few ideas like that for those that have been in the industry for as long as I have, you can find those little snippets quite easily about what they're trying to get to.
It sounds like an interesting idea for industry, but would a government ever be bold enough to do something like that and risk the electoral backlash?
Look, I think part of the issues around what you're doing in this area has to be solved. And I think that's a political lesson to be heeded from the last election, is if you're going to make changes, people have to understand why. Why is this needed, and what will that fix? And in this situation, I think it was obvious that the tax on investment earnings was mostly impacted wealthy retirees, and it was, and they were still getting something that was quite beneficial, but not as beneficial. I think it can be solved.
Just while I've got you, Rice Warner has just released a report into the cost of running self-managed super funds. What did it find?
Well, I think the self-managed super fund industry has gone through quite a dramatic change over the last 5+ years, but mostly the last 5 years. I think one of the things I did find is that they are quite cost-effective over $500,000. And people say that the self-managed super funds at that level, they don't have the same scale as an APRA-regulated fund. But one thing you do forget is that you can acquire scale. And so what has happened in that industry is that the platform providers do have scale themselves. They provide their service to the self-managed super fund owners. And those platforms have really, really improved out of sight over the last 5 years. And so that's now really cost effective to the extent that a $500,000 self-managed super fund is about the same cost as an APRA-regulated fund. And you can even go down a little bit below that to still be quite competitive.
Fascinating. Thanks so much for your analysis, Andrew Boal.
My pleasure. Good to see you.